So, do you see the presentation?
Yes, Chet.
Okay, fine. Oh, so I'll just start now.
Please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jette. I'm an OT and I work for Protac in Denmark. So I've been an OT for more than 30 years. So I'm beginning to have quite a lot of experience with helping aids, with children, with elderly people in the psychiatry as well. And I'm not going to do it just the way Ben did it, because to understand and use the products, you need to know something about the sensory integration theory behind them. So I will come into that, and then we'll come more to the products and how to use them. But the products are developed from the sensory integration theory by Jean Ayers. And as we do not have so much time today, I'll not go too far into some of the subjects, but focusing on what I think will be the most important for you to understand the way that these products work. But it is Jean Ayers' theory, and according to her, we have 7 senses. And if you imagine that each sense has a piece in a puzzle in the brain, so these pieces need to fit together nicely, and so that the puzzle is complete. When it is like this, you integrate the sensory input in a useful way, and the brain is able to organize sensory inputs. And that means that you will not be overstimulated or understimulated, that the brain can keep up organizing the sensory inputs that it gets. But if you are disabled in some way, if you have a brain damage, and that can be a psychiatric disease as well, then this puzzle will not fit. Some of the pieces will grow too big or too small. And what the brain always tries to do is to make the puzzle fit again. It will try to create the calmness in the brain, because that's what the brain needs. About the 7 senses, in the middle, we've got the vestibular sense, the touch sense, and the proprioceptive sense. These are our 3 primary senses. These are the senses that tells the brain something about the body. It gives us the identity. It shows us where we are, how we are positioned, how our legs and arms are positioned. And these 3 senses need to be well stimulated. If they are not, you will see this pattern that the people are moving all the time. It's very difficult for them to concentrate. It's difficult for them to do a task. They have these visible problems that we see in the world. On both sides, we have got the secondary senses. It's a smell, vision, taste, and hearing. These are the sensory inputs we get from the surroundings. And we need to have this filter with so tiny holes that the brain leaves out the unnecessary inputs and take in the necessary inputs. If you have this sensory integration problem, this filter will often have too large holes, so that you get too much information, and the brain cannot find out which one to focus on and which one to leave out. Then you can see the proprioceptive piece. It's a bit outside the puzzle, and it's because it knows some tricks. To create calmness to the puzzle, to reduce the stress level in your brain, you always use your proprioceptive sense. You start to move, you start to jump, you start to do something in order to create this calmness. And what is special about the two is that you cannot overstimulate on this sense. You can get overstimulation on the 6 other senses, but never on the proprioceptive sense. And you need to remember that, because you'll meet people who say that he gets overstimulated when I put a ball blanket on him. No, he does not. He doesn't like the feeling of it. And he is a bit annoyed about it, but it's not overstimulation. Overstimulation is never healthy. It's something you can see and measure, and you should avoid it. I'll focus, no, this puzzle, we'll come back to that, not physically, but keep it in mind. As I said, the proprioceptive sense, you will always use that to create calmness. So why do we put balls into the products? And that's because that the brain doesn't care whether it gets the stimulation on the proprioceptive sense actively by moving or passively by deep point pressure. So you know that the difference is when it's healthy to move, but if you need to move all the time to create the calmness to the brain, then it perhaps would be better if you put in an helping aid instead. For instance, a ball blanket, a ball, whatnot, any kind of ball product. So the balls will do the job. You get the various point pressures because they need to move a little bit. And then you get the deep point pressures that stimulate the muscle and joint sense so that the brain gets the information that it needs. And you don't have to do the job. You can be sitting still on a chair, you can be lying in your bed, and you can fall asleep. We never refer to our products as weighted products, and neither should you, because weighted products is just weight, and nothing proves that that has an effect for very long. If you put on just weight, then at first the brain will react positively because something is happening to the sensory system. But within a very short time, the effect will drop. When you put on a ball blanket or any kind of ball product, you will keep on giving the stimuli to the brain. So you will never adapt that feeling, and that, but you need to put some weight behind the point pressure to reach and stimulate the muscle and joint sense. And we know that most people use a 7 kilo, a grown-up person from the age of 6 and upwards, use a 7 kilo blanket because our experience tells us that that is that's what works, and you don't need any more. If you need a 10 kilo blanket, we are very often inside the psychiatry, and it has nothing to do with your weight or how tall you are, but it has something to do with your sensory system, how low registering the sensory system is. If you need a lot of stimuli to get a reaction in your sensory system, then perhaps you need a heavier product because you need more weight behind the point pressure. Right, and remember that's a big difference. You've got ball products, and we have a lot of evidence, and we do a lot of research, and then you have weighted products, and they do not have any results from research because it's very difficult to get any results at all. We'll focus a little bit more on the proprioceptive sense, because it's important for you to understand what it is that the ball, deep point pressure from the balls do. we've got receptors in joints, in our muscles, and exchange in the muscle tone. And we stimulate the proprioceptive sense both actively and passively, either by moving or by deep point pressure. And you cannot overstimulate it, and it always has a stress-reducing effect on the brain. And it helps you process all this sensory inputs you get. So something happens to this filter, you see. And that means that when you get the proprioceptive stimulation, this filter will get more tiny holes. So the brain, it's easier for the brain to sort the inputs, and you leave the unimportant inputs out and you take in what you need. And you will very often see that this filter is in a very bad shape with a lot of people. So they get this overstimulation, and you have this pattern. They move a lot and they try to help themselves. They try to survive. And when you get the stimulation, this filter will be much more functioning, much better functioning. You only need a few stimuli every second, but if you are in a place where a lot of things is happening, then you can get 11 million inputs every second. So it's very important that this filter has the tiny holes. So you achieve two things. You achieve that the stress level, the body conscience, and a better functioning filter. We'll not go much more into the proprioceptive sense, but be aware of what the person show you when you come out. If they have this difficulties in passing through passing furniture, or if they are clumsy, if they do not have the eye-hand coordination, if they cannot adjust how much strength to use when doing a task, then you might see that they have, if they are walking on their toes, then you can see that they need some stimulation on the proprioceptive sense. And anything they do is in a way to survive. And you have a lot to do with wheelchair users. And that's a group of people that are in desperate need of getting some information on the proprioceptive sense, because they move so little. And when they just sit there, they do not get the information or inputs on the proprioceptive sense. And you will see that the mess in the head, the way to organize sensory input is very often very poor. So you have to be aware of them, give them some information, give them some proprioceptive stimuli, so that it's easier for them to, be awake, to be present, to keep focused, to be in the chair. Because of course they'll try to get out of the sitting position because they need to do something, and they'll try to do it. The brain will always try to get what it needs. So either they will try to escape from the belt, or they will bite themselves, they will grind their teeth, they'll do something. So be very aware of this group of users. The tactile sense is important in the way that when the way that we find the right product for a special user is to find out how should we give the proprioceptive stimulation, considering how the tactile sense is functioning. So so you have to consider what kind of blanket or ball blanket you should use, or if it should be small balls or bigger balls in the MyFit vest or anything. You just have to consider the tactile sense as well. Very often, and they have this tactile defensiveness. That means that the information from the skin to the brain goes wrong. So what should be pleasant and nice is actually painful and annoying, and they hate to be touched, and they try to escape from it, and they fiddle with things, and they do not, they have a stress level that increases during the day because everything touching them is absolutely terrible. And then we have to go back to the puzzle, and you imagine that the tactile piece has grown too big, and then we add the proprioceptive stimuli to reduce the size of the tactile. It could as well be on the hearing or on the vision, that you have to reduce the overstimulation and add the proprioceptive stimulation. It always has this calming effect, and you cannot do anything wrong. If you put it all into a house, then we have the primary senses in the bottom, and they need to be well stimulated to have this solid base. Then on top of them, we put the secondary senses. And that means that when the sensory system is well stimulated, you have an understanding that the body and the brain works together with motor planning, and it has an effect on your concentration, because brain doesn't have to call for information all the time. And when you are able to concentrate, it's easier for you to learn something. It's easier for you to behave properly in outside in the room. And you have the brain is much better at planning. So you remember to get up in the morning, you remember to pay your bills, and so on. So it all starts with the sensory system, that this is well functioning, and that the brain is able to focus on whatever it is meant to focus on, and that it doesn't concentrate on something else which is not important. So the stress level, the filter to organize and sort sensory inputs. This is well functioning here. Before we go to the products, I will like to explain what the sleep means, how important it is. And this, what you see here, is how a grown-up person should sleep. And a grown-up person needs to sleep for 8 hours every night, because we have to go through sleeping cycles. And in the bottom of each sleeping cycle, we've got the deep sleep, and that is where we need to go to. So at first you have to fall asleep, and you shouldn't spend more than 30 minutes on that. So if you have a child, or you have a grown-up person that spends 2-3 hours on trying to fall asleep, then it is bad, because it makes the night sleep very short, because you have to get up in the morning anyway. When you're fallen asleep, you go through 2 light stages of sleep, and it will be about 1 hour, and then you go down into the deep sleep. And when you are down in the deep sleep, you are laying completely still. You do not move at all. And a lot of things happens with your inner organs, with your hormones. But what also happens is that the brain shrinks a little bit, so that you wash out stress hormones. And that's why we should sleep for 8 hours, because we have to go down into the deep sleep 4 or 5 times to get this all these stress hormones washed out. And then we restituate on soul level. When you've been down into the deep sleep, you go up into the REM sleep, and that's where you dream. And then you have to go from one sleeping cycle over into the next. And when you do that, you are actually awake for a few seconds. But if you have a normal sleep, you'll just turn over and continue your sleep. But if you have this anxiety and you need that the brain needs to get some information, then you get out of bed and you have a walk and you eat something perhaps, and then you have to go to sleep again. So that means that if they have been into the deep sleep at all, they have a lot of wake ups, and they most of them haven't been down into the deep sleep. And you can see that the next morning you need to be rested, and life should be quite easy the next morning. Not, but if you haven't had this good night's sleep, then everything is a problem. There are a lot of conflicts, and it's difficult to focus, and you forget things and so on. What the ball blanket do, and just keep in mind we have all the research, is that you fall asleep within these 30 minutes. You go down into the deep sleep because the balls help the brain to relax, and you don't have to move all the time. So you go down into the deep sleep. And when you start to wake up a little bit before you go from one cycle to the next, then instead of you doing the work and you moving, then the balls will do the job. So they change their position, and you don't have to move more than just a few millimeters for them to change the position, activate a new receptor, and the brain gets the information that it needs passively. So we take advantage of the passive stimulation from the balls. And then you do not wake up. You just continue your sleep, go into the next sleeping cycle, down in the deep sleep, and so on, so that you the next morning are rested. And that means that the stress level in the brain is as low as it can be. And that means that it will take more hours before you are filled up, and perhaps you need a new sensory break, that the brain needs some stimulation again to calm down and so on. Right. We've got 3 types of ball blankets, and which one to use depends on the person that is supposed to lay under it. But if you do not have any problems with tactile defensiveness or are disturbed by sounds of any kind, then we mostly use the Protac Flexible. It is split up into 40 rooms, 4 sections with each 10 rooms. So the balls move a little bit here, and that is, you get it as a junior blanket, and you get it as a grown-up blanket. You can get it in 10 kilo, and you can get it with extra length. So that is typically the blanket you use if you don't have any problems with tactile defensiveness. If you have problems with that, you would use the corn blanket. Here you see that the balls are placed in lines. They are laying loose inside the lines, but so they move a little bit, but not so much as in flexible. We use that for the tactile, the people with tactile defensiveness, because they need to have something predictable on the skin, but at the same time, they need to get the deep point pressure, the proprioceptive stimulation. They have the same weight, the flexible and the calm blanket, but it is very, very different to be under them. So don't just grab any blanket, but ask questions. And if you do not know what to ask, or if you are in doubt, then you can always call me. Then we've got the Protac ball blanket combi. That is a flexible blanket, but it has mixed filling, no polystyrene mixed with the balls. And it has a cover as well, so the pressure from the balls will be a little less. It's more duvet like, so you get, it's more comfortable. So we use that for people with a very low BMI, and we use it for people with anxiety, those who need you know, to cuddle and to just feel comfy. So various almost ball blankets that seems very much the same, the weight is the same, but to be under them is very different. So it depends on the sensory profile. So ask questions about tactile defensiveness, anxiety, and you know, cannot remember anything from today, or everything from today. So you can always give me a call or write me an email. Then we've got various products to use during the day. And you have a lot of focus on the SenSit chair. And this is a marvelous product. It can be used by anyone from the age of 3 and upwards. And in any place, we use it a lot in kindergartens, in schools, and special schools, special kindergartens, special institutions, psychiatric hospitals, prisons, whatnot, private homes. You sit in it. So in fact, it's just like a ball blanket, but instead of laying in your bed, then you sit in the chair, and that means that the level, your arousal level will not decrease so much because you have your head up. And you place it in a room and you cover yourself with the wings, and or if it's a wheelchair user, you can use the wings to support the sitting position. So again, remember that group of persons, to get them out of the wheelchair and put them into the SenSit, or supply with the Senson in the middle, or the knee blanket on the bottom left. We've got the SenSit chair to use inside. We've got the standard model. We've got one with a higher back for people of more than 180. And we've got the outside version, the SenSit Nature. You have an incontinence cover in the sitting part. So if you have an accident, then it will not ruin the inner bag. And you can use it for people who, if it is children, it's typically that they have it either in a silent room, or in a library, or in a sensory room, or you have it in the classroom, so that they're able to be a part of the class or the company, and still get all the stimulation, so that they are able to manage. But it's also easier for them to focus. So you can use it anywhere. For elderly and for people who have difficulties with getting up again, we have something called a frame. I forgot whether, yes, it'd be on the next. Yeah, well, perhaps you should just I've forgotten, I've got this slide. Yeah. So you see the SenSit standard, and you see the SenSit. It's not the much difference just to look at for the people more than 180. The outdoor, and then we have the SenSit straight for most is used in elderly homes because they have a more upright position and they like to be in that position, and it's easy to get up from. It is built up in another way. Then you have the SenSit frame, and that means if you're, I've got a soon available, yes. So if you put the SenSit into the frame, then you have the handles, and it's easier, it's a little bit higher, and it's easy to move the chair as well. So if you have bought a normal SenSit chair and there's some kind of change in your functional level, then you can add the frame and you can still keep the SenSit and still use it. And you cannot use it wrong, and you cannot use it too much. So I'll say that this is the product that we sell the most next from ball blankets, because it fits in everywhere and to any person. It can be personal and it could be for more people to use. I'll just go back to the other products, and that will be the last. MyFit Vest, the good thing about that is that you can carry the stimulation with you when you walk. So you use it in kindergartens, you use it in schools, you use it at work, you use it for people who have problems with getting out of the door to go shopping and so on. Then it gets much more easy for them to be in the situation. They can be to a family dinner, they can go to the cinema, because they get the stimulation while they are at present in any kind of company. You measure, it's a breast measure, because it's important that the MyFit Vest is close to the body and that you can zip it, and so that the point pressure and the weight from the balls is on your torso. So it's not just something hanging on your shoulders. So you carry it on your torso. If you're not much into the MyFit Vest, then the Senson in the middle could be a very good choice. And we use it mainly for elderly persons, but also for children at school and for wheelchair users. Then we got the Need Me, and that's very much for elderly people, for wheelchair users, and they use it quite a lot in schools as well. So it depends on, the person, what does he prefer, because we're working with the primary sensors, and you cannot compare your own to another person's primary sensors. So it depends on how the sensory system works and where you're supposed to use the product, what to choose. So I think that, well, my time has gone, so I'll just say that we do a lot of research, and you can read about it on our website, and that is what differs from other products, that we develop and produce the products ourselves. So we have always hands-on, and we are just a bunch of OTs and PTs. And be free to write to me, send me questions, call me for a piece of advice. Right.
Thanks very much, Jet. Thanks very much, Jet.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Jet before we go? If you can put it into the chat.
See what is. Is there any questions? I can see the.
I don't think there is, Jet. Feel free to come on if anyone has any questions. And again, if anyone wants anything to demo, we would have a lot of demo stock at MMS. So if anybody wants any of the reps' phone numbers, you can contact me on 086 6078 773. And I'd happily pass on your number for you, because it's done by county. There's 4 or 5 of us around the place. All right. Thanks, Jet.
Welcome.
I think we'll finish it there, guys. Thanks very much to everyone for attending, and especially to Jet and Ben.
You're welcome.